You know what time the game starts?
Art 101 with Mr. Burgher.
Welcome back to Art 101 with me, Mr. Burgher. I'm a professional artist and master educator trying to bring you the best in art history videos. And as usual, this video is intended for those 13 years of age and older.
Hey baby, let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs and have some fun!
As always, I appreciate likes, shares, and new subscribers.
Hey, let's go! Hey, get this thing going now!
So coming up is Super Bowl 54. 54 reminds me of 1854, and arguably the greatest work to come out of 1854 was a work by Courbet called The Artist's Studio.
To civilization.
So before we get too far into the big game, let's get a little bit more into The Artist's Studio.
I'll show you, just make sure you got a good view. Get some popcorn, maybe some jujubes, a slushie, maybe some snow caps, I don't know. You're gonna want to be comfortable today. Watch the show.
In 1854, Gustave Courbet began to create one of his greatest paintings, The Artist's Studio, which is currently located in the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, France. The setting of the painting was Courbet's studio in Ornans, France. And this particular painting very much represents his time in the mid-1800s, where he's very much in the realistic mindset. So what is a realist?
Listen to me, I'm telling you now. I know him like a book.
Gustave Courbet is definitely one of the founders of the movement known as Realism. Realism is an artistic movement that emerged in France in the 1840s. The movement really is a reaction against the romanticism that dominated France since the early 19th century. Instead of exaggerating life, realism sought to portray real life without idealizing their situation or person. The logic behind this is that sometimes when everyday life is right in front of us, we don't really recognize it. And so the realist is putting everyday life out there so people can appreciate what is real and not some fantasy.
Because you become so blinded by the pattern and the routine that you're not able to comprehend the beauty or the surroundings that are there.
Now before we get too far into the painting, let's also look a little bit at the creator, Gustave Courbet. Gustave Courbet was from a small eastern French town called Ornans. His father was a farmer, and young Courbet loved the land and the countryside. Courbet would leave the countryside for the big lights of Paris in 1839, where his family encouraged him to study law.
It's a bad call.
However, he only had one ambition, and that was obviously to become an artist. During his years of study, he would attempt to get into the salon, which was really the easiest way to gain notoriety at that time. Over a 6-year stretch, only 3 of 25 submitted works went into the salon, and those works sold for basically nothing. You know, what do I know? I color for a living, but Courbet was very influential as an artist. Through the struggle, he would gain notoriety and become a leader of the art movement that is now known as the Realists.
But they are who we thought they were.
Most would concede that Gustave Courbet was the central artist in this movement, although there were other artists like Millet, Daumier, and Corot. Well, perhaps you want to know a little bit more about this painting.
I don't know. I just want to see him. It's no special, nothing special.
By the time Gustave Courbet created the painter's studio, he had become an established artist, finding a number of patrons to purchase his works. This was an allegorical insight into his studio. Now, what's an allegory?
Damn, that's a good question.
Simply put, an allegory is a fictional, symbolic narrative that conveys a meaning not explicitly set by the storyteller. One example of this is Aesop's Fables. The story contains multiple layers of meaning that the reader can understand through their interpretation of the story.
I consider the source. I consider the source.
The work is further explained through its subtitle, A true allegory concerning 7 years of my artistic life. As we can see, the back wall of the studio is very blank. It was his intention to create various representations of his life, but he ran out of time creating it. So he just covered up these sketches with the red-brown color that we see now, leaving it partially finished.
Orange, purple, black, red!
But for him to be able to see that in the heat of it is something. I mean, that's he's got great eyes, great vision.
So you're probably asking yourself, who are the individuals inside this painting? As mentioned, the figures in the painting are allegorical representations of various influences on Courbet's artistic life. On the left are the figures of his hometown roots. It's also safe to say that this is a reflection of the everyday people living in Paris. According to Courbet's notes, the Jewish man and the Irish woman were based on sketches that he made during a trip to London in 1848. Other figures represented are the Undertaker, the Poacher, a mannequin representing the crucifixion, as well as several other figures. In the center, Courbet is working on a landscape, with his back turned to a nude model, which is a symbol of academic art. The female figure is based on an 1854 photograph, and he is one of the first to utilize photography as a way to gather studies and source material. The landscape itself very much represents his homeland. The boy to Courbet's left is a reference to innocence. The boy is looking up to Courbet. With his clogged shoes and torn-up shirt, the boy's youth, and perhaps even his poverty, make him pure. Courbet believed that urban life and sophistication distanced the artist from the truth of nature. It was his goal to return to the pure and redirect his sight through those of the eyes of a child. And lastly, the cat, often seen as a symbol of independence or liberty.
Is repetition, developing skills, and then under pressure being able to perform.
On the right are his friends and patrons, mainly elite Parisians that he would meet during his professional career. The majority of these portraits are copied from other portraits that he had created or from photographs.
What are you looking at?
Upon completion, the work would be attacked by academic painters. You see, realism was the enemy to the art superiority, so in response to this, Courbet takes the work away from the academics and gives it back to the people directly through a private Pavilion of Realism exhibition at the 1855 World's Fair.
It can tear you apart or it can bring you together.
The work would be rolled and unrolled multiple times, causing several cracks that had to be restored. But at any rate, in 1855, for a small fee, one could see the Realist manifesto and 40 works, but the main attraction would be the artist's studio. This was a huge success for Courbet. Through this exhibition, he would ask, "Do you see the painting? What is it of?"
What do you think?
Well, hopefully you think it's of nature, because that's what it is. And it's history, the history of an artist reflecting back on his struggle and how he got to success.
Nothing is work unless you'd rather be doing something else.
Alright, now that we got that out of the way, let's get to the game.
It's a matter of knowledge and how to use it now.